President Shetima meets global health partners, discusses health financing and other deliverables.
Nigeria is the largest recipient of global fund financing of any country in the world, and we are in the process of designing programs.
Chief of Army Staff moves to implement government's directive on welfare of families of fallen heroes.
That is why the federal government has taken it upon itself at this stage to discharge that backlog and bring relief to the families of our departed colleagues.
First Lady Oluremi Tinubu donates 500 million naira to victims of attacks in Plateau State.
I want you to know that you are not alone in the journey to recovery. We stand with you in solidarity and prayers.
And on Good Morning Nigeria today, we continue our conversation on how to boost Nigeria's external reserves.
Two weeks ago, we started a discussion on boosting Nigeria's external reserves, where we brought together experts in financial matters to dig into the current state of the nation's reserves. This followed some concerns on the purported decline in Nigeria's foreign reserves.
That's right, Kirian. Now, it will be recalled that the American financial services firm JP Morgan had released a contentious report claiming that Nigeria's foreign reserves were far lower than previously estimated. JP Morgan also claimed that a combination of factors, including foreign exchange forwards, securities lending, currency swaps, and outstanding contracts, had, in its opinion, weakened Nigeria's net external reserves to an all-time low, and that was at the end of 2022.
All right, and the Central Bank of Nigeria, however, said that the nation's external reserves stood at $33.88 billion as of August 2023, down from $37.08 billion at the end of last year. It disputed JP Morgan's claim, saying it was misleading as the analysis was totally out of context. Indeed, many analysts berated the JP Morgan for going public with their unsubstantiated claims, which they said were aimed at running down the nation's economy.
Now, while that argument continued, we set out to look at how Nigeria's foreign reserves could be boosted, and by bringing in, of course, experts to dissect the matter. Their submissions clearly indicated that one of the major challenges to boosting Nigeria's external reserves remains the high level of importation and lack of commensurate export.
Yes, Kingsley, this has been a well-known fact that seems to have defied solutions as Nigeria's thirst for import keeps growing while production either stagnates or dwindles. This, in essence, puts enormous pressure on available foreign exchange, making it entirely difficult for the country to properly prioritize the areas that need foreign exchange for productive rather than consumptive purposes.
Now, some other issues raised by our guests on the first occasion that we took on this subject matter with respect to the use of external reserves border on transparency and accountability in the deployment of forex, as some items imported can in fact be locally sourced. Now, even if they are to be genuinely imported, there are allegations of sharp practices, including over-invoicing, and that these practices create a questionable forex expenditure profile.
Exactly. And this morning, we are revisiting the subject matter to further explore how Nigeria can harness its potentialities to build a healthy foreign reserve. This is Good Morning Nigeria on the network service of the NTA. We thank you for joining us this morning. I am Kirian Umayo.
And I'm Kingsley Osadolo. I join my colleague Kirian to also welcome you to the program. live on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority, and of course from our headquarters studios in the nation's capital. In the course of the program, we have our complimentary segments. These will include newspaper review, business, and others. But for now, we take the morning news, and here is Ann Jibuno, who has the news. Hello, Ann.
Yeah, hello, Kingsley and Kieran. Good morning, Nigeria. Here's the news. Vice President Kashim Shettima has departed Abuja to represent President Bola Ahmed Tinubu at the G77 Plus China Leaders Summit in Havana, Cuba, from the 15th to the 17th of September this year. The Vice President will be joining other world leaders, including the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres, at the summit to deliberate on development issues facing members, mostly from the Global South. The summit will equally explore proactive ways of addressing challenges facing the development of the member states, leveraging science, technology and innovation to enhance socio-economic growth. Also, the Vice President will, on the sidelines of the summit, hold bilateral meetings with other world leaders to promote Nigeria's trade and investment relations in line with the economic development diplomacy of the Tinubu administration. The Havana summit is being hosted by the President of the Republic of Cuba, Miguel Diaz-Canel, in his capacity as chairman of the G77 and China, under the theme Current Development Challenges, the Role of Science, Technology and Innovation. Nigeria is a founding member of the G77 group, which was established in 1984 by 77 developing countries. Meanwhile, the federal government is prioritizing increase in domestic health financing, industrialization and improved health outcomes. Vice President Kashim Shettima stated this when a delegation from the Global Health Partners, that's the Global Fund, U.S. President's Malaria Initiative, and the U.S. President's Emergency Plan for AIDS Relief at the Presidential Villa.
Retrain 120,000 frontline health workers in Nigeria, in all the states, over the next 12 to 18 months. These workers will be trained. That's an important contribution to build Nigeria's healthcare system to be more resilient.
Nigeria's zero-dose learning hub and effort at ensuring every eligible child anywhere in the country gets the needed vaccine against preventable diseases has been launched by the federal government to offer an extensive platform for all individuals engaged in the administration of immunization services across all levels of government.
Work together until every child is protected against all vaccine preventable diseases. This zero-dose learning hub is hereby inaugurated.
The prospect of having new roofs over their heads that's after their homes were destroyed during recent attacks has become heightened for 500 residents of Mangu and 5 other local government areas in Plateau State. This is as made possible by the Renewed Hope Initiative, a pet project of Nigeria's First Lady, Oluremi Tinubu, which donated 1 million houses, 1 million naira, to each of the victims.
To your homes and communities to rebuild.
And President Bola Tinubu has directed the immediate investment of payment of group life assurance insurance to families of deceased personnel of the Nigerian Army. Chief of Army Staff, Lieutenant General Taufik Lagbaja, stated this at the periodic Army conference in Abuja.
We are encouraged not to be demoralized by the recent incident in Niger State, but to intensify our efforts with renewed vigor to make the adversaries continuously pay for their sins.
And the remains of about 30 farmers that lost their lives as a result of a boat mishap at the Bajibo area in Mokwa local government area of Niger State have been laid to rest. And to prevent future mishap, The agency responsible for this, Hyperdep, has donated life jackets to the community.
It took almost number of 130 people.
Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs and Poverty Eradication says it is ready to partner with the Ministry of Interior in the areas of internal security, human trafficking and migration as a way of tackling the root causes of humanitarian crisis and poverty in the country. This was emphasized during a visit by the Minister, Dr. Betta Hedu, to the Interior Ministry in Abuja.
We need to work hand in hand to ensure that we reduce the level of insecurity, which would lead to humanitarian crisis and then lead to poverty, and poverty will further feed back.
As a matter of fact, it's not just a one-off thing. We should have a joint interministerial committee to work on critical issues.
Well, that's the news for now. Good Morning Nigeria continues with Kieran and Kingsley after the break.
Fellow Nigerians, I made a solemn pledge to work for you, how to improve your welfare and living condition. It's of paramount importance to me, and it is the only thing that keeps me up day and night.
Natural tomato paste. Erisco tomato paste. Aládùn pẹ̀lú. Mexico tomato paste.
Buy made in Nigeria. Buy a Risco product.
We are Inter-Party Advisory Council, IPAC. We are political parties. We are the pathway to political power. IPAC, in line with its core mandate, is carrying out peer review mechanism for elected political office holders. Performance of the President of Nigeria, state governors, state and National Assembly members will be assessed comparatively. This will trigger healthy competition amongst our elected politicians to deliver dividends of democracy like good roads, good health care delivery system, good schools, full employment, security, and so on. This prestigious program will soon be shown live on television stations across Nigeria. IPAC, deepening and consolidating democracy.
Something new is about to hit your imagination of TV. A brand new sundial with StarTime's inbuilt technology. New TV innovation with an inbuilt decoder that connects you to both StarTime's antenna and satellite signal. StarTime Sundial TV, you can enjoy over 300 local and international channels, 1 month StarTime's highest bouquet for free, automatic system update. More benefits, more affordable. StarTimes Sundial TV is available in all StarTimes branches and dealers countrywide. StarTimes Inside, entertainment inbuilt.
You have to move from the point where you protect and defend your religion to a point where you also recognize the rights of the other person, of the other religion, and protect it. So if I am protecting my own territory and my own people and trying to emphasize their rights and protect their rights, I should also be thinking about how to protect the rights of the others.
Both Islam and Christianity recognize and defer to God, and both recognize the temporariness of the life of this world, and that ultimately we all go back to God for the day of reckoning, when everybody will render an account of his life on this temporary abode.
All right, you're watching Good Morning Nigeria. We thank you for being there. Now, the federal government and the International Fund for Agricultural Development are currently reviewing the impact of their joint project in Nigeria. Let's now join Kunle Adeye for these and others as we bring you business news.
The review mission of the Value Chain Development Program focuses on rice and cassava production. Those responsible for the project's implementation are from the United Nations, Federal Ministry of Agriculture, and the benefiting farmers. Despite environmental challenges like flood, they emphasized that the Value Chain Initiative has significantly improved on national food security.
We are also able to give support to our farmers who are worst hit by the flood last year. We gave them intervention. We gave them some intervention during the dry season.
The mainstreaming and commitment of gender and youth inclusion is evident through job creations, skill development, and income-generating opportunities for women and youth.
Country representative of the International Fund for Agricultural Development said priority will be on climate-smart agriculture, youth empowerment, and digital data generation.
Our vision in doing this joint supervision mission is to identify ways to enhance the results in line with the Nigeria food system transformation pathways.
And to the latest of Tuesday's tradings on the floor of the exchange. With business news, I'm Kule Adeyeye.
Thank you very much, Kunle, for the business news package on Good Morning Nigeria. Coming up next, newspaper review.
We welcome Chukwudi Okoliwaja once more as we do a review of today's daily. Chukwudi, you're welcome to the program.
And Kiri and I welcome you as well,
thank you.
Even though you're the host.
I know.
Hello, Kingsley.
Hi, Chukwudi, how are you?
I see the page you're flipping through. Is that the latest JAM result? You're welcome, too.
I think they check the results online now.
Online.
All right, we have a number of papers this morning, about four to do. I have Punch and the New Telegraph. Let's begin with Punch newspaper, above the name flag. Now, Nigerians to clear goods from Cotonou ports, according to customs. The story is on page 20. Despite serial challenges, Nigerians believe in democracy, oppose authoritarianism. All right, that's on page 9. Tinubu orders probe as 901 die in 61 boat accidents. It's on page 15. Now, the lead story on the Punch, Labour threatens indefinite strike, gives 1 week ultimatum. With two riders, giving a bag of rice to 12 people, 100 million naira each to each lawmaker, insulting, that's according to Labour. Government has absconded from negotiation table, failed to meet workers' demands, says NLC. Now, the photo story on the Punch, one dies as truck crashes on Lagos Bridge. It's on page 5. UBA grows half-year gross earnings to 982 billion naira. It's on page 18. Suspect kills 2 Bauchi workers. Buries corpses in shallow grave. It's on page 5. Libya flood, Morocco earthquake, death toll hit 6,000. More on that is on page 15 of the Punch newspaper. Let me quickly run through the New Telegraph newspaper. Above the name flag. Carlo retains Senate seat, defeats PDP LP at tribunal. That's on pages 2 and 8. House of Reps to open Biden's impeachment inquiry. That's on pages 5 and 7. That's on foreign scene now. Akeredolu sacks deputy governor's aides. NURTW FTW will fight imposters with our blood. Barowa. All that on page 29. Some tribunal judgments contravened established jurisprudence. That's according to LP. All right, on pages 5 and 7. Now, stay at home has ended in Southeast, according to Chief of Army Staff. Says Boko Haram activities, other terrorists have been curtailed. 200 churches shut down. 23 pastors killed by bandits in Kaduna in 4 years, according to CAN. Kidnappers intercept 2 Benue buses, abduct 10. Army floats Special Forces unit. You get all that story on page 2, 3, and 30 of the New Telegraph. Most National Assembly members ignorant of their party's manifestos, according to PDP. Yes, on page 4. Inaugurates a research institute. Floods, 1,000 missing, 2,000 dead as dams burst in Libya. I was shocked by what I saw. Morocco quake, frantic search for survivors continues as death toll nears 3,000. Federal government inaugurates first cargo movement on Lagos-Ibadan rail corridor. Nigeria, now second largest crude oil producer in Africa, according to OPEC. It's on page 3 and 8. Influential people behind illegal mining in Nigeria, says a senator. Find out more on page 3. He also says security challenge around it due to humongous proceeds therein, mining on exclusive list, but federal government not serious about it. Read all that on page 3. Federal government, 60,000 passports backlog cleared within 4 days. It's on page 2.
Okay, we also have the Leadership newspaper and The Nation, but some of the stories that Kieran read are also on the front pages of these two papers. So let me just cherry pick and we'll revert to our reviewer. Leadership above a nameplate. U.S. Congress begins impeachment inquiry against Biden. Halt ceding of Adamawa land to Cameroon now, reps tell federal government. And NURTW, factions in bloody clash in Abuja. That's trending. NURTW, factions in bloody clash in Abuja. Tinubu probes both mishaps in Niger and Adamawa. As schools resume, parents and guardians groan over fee increase amid rising inflation. And fears heighten over a possible rise in dropouts and out-of-school children, while we are increasing fees, according to school operators. And private school teachers lament low wages and delayed salaries. UN, NEDC to resettle 2.2 million IDPs. 5,000 feared dead after Libya floods. Wike probes $600 million garnishee order against FCTA. Now, that's the photograph on the front page of the Leadership shows the scene of an accident on the Todola Bridge in Lagos yesterday. So Lagos was pretty wet yesterday. But you can see the truck lying on its side there, apparently. And, that's this one person died in that accident. Now, for the Nation newspaper, say federal government targets inflation cut with 50% FARC savings. Bauchi Emirate mobilized 1,000 hunters to battle kidnappers. Trade between Nigeria and EU grows to 45 billion euros. Otedola hails Tinubu for resolving UAE visa ban and flight suspension. Burial for Akintola Williams next month. President orders mourn icon. Wike moves to sanitize Abuja land administration. Minister directs FCT secretaries to tackle insecurity and transportation hitches. First Lady donates 500 million naira to 500 families in Plateau. Chukudi.
Thank you, Kingsley. I like that last bit you read. Okay, maybe not exactly the last point. You were saying there that trade between Nigeria and EU has grown to 45 billion euros. And I say that there is still room to swing a cat. Because the things that can be pulled from Africa, for Africa's benefit, not subjugation, are just too many. It is for people to explore and for us to create the proverbial enabling environment for things to begin to happen. I know that the days ahead are going to be brighter days. Chief of Army Staff saying that sit-at-home has ended in the Southeast, and I say the power of negotiation will always continue to win the day. When that sit-at-home started, some of us said, no, somebody has shot himself or herself in the foot. It's not going to work. It's going to be a boomerang. It eventually became a boomerang, and I'm happy now that reasoning is overtaking what may be sentiment pushed initially. But on a more elaborate note, post-subsidy talks, Labour threatens indefinite strike, gives 1 week's notice. Giving a bag of rice to 12 people, 100 million to each lawmaker, insulting. That's coming from Labour. We must attribute. Government has absconded from negotiation table, fails to meet workers' demands, so says Labour again. Labour's 21-day notice expires in a week's time. It blames the possibility of the proposed indefinite strike on government's inability to provide palliatives to assuage hardship, or rather reduce hardship occasioned by the removal of fuel subsidy. The story is always the same, if you ask me. What I see in all of this is the potency or lack of it, of the capacity to negotiate and carry along. NLC's National Assistant Secretary, that's the Secretary General, that's Christopher Onyeka, is blaming the federal government for reportedly allocating a bag of rice to a dozen citizens while giving 100 million naira palliative to each member of the National Assembly. We must say at this point that this is Labour's claim. But just in case figures are accurate, it stands to reason to expect that the reported 100 million naira is likely to also be for some of the lawmakers' constituents, or whoever they pledge allegiance to or they feel allegiance to. The situation to me is that we all have we all have a dire situation to deal with. So I ask, what sincerity is each party around that table seeing in the other person? Because that drives conviction, that drives acceptance of a stance or a situation. What sincerity are they saying? I feel this is dragging out for too long. By now we should have heard a few definitive pronouncements. For instance, if workers are going to get anything added to the package they take home at the end of the month, is it not about time we begin to hear such things? Just a week ago, government said a structure would be in place in 2 weeks. So let's hope that in 1 more week's time, we're going to see that. What is Labour being told about the situation government is facing? Again, the power to convince and all that. Now, on a positive note, well, what we said now is positive, but I do think that this one is good for democracy. The Punch panorama is saying that despite serial challenges, Nigerians believe in democracy. They oppose authoritarianism. And that, I say, is sweet music to whoever lives in this century. The other time I said, I don't want to be ruled by a man I didn't elect. It's a personal conviction, and I am happy that a majority of Nigerians are thinking like that. And it's a message coming in good time, given what is happening in the sub-region, you know. We must remember that the Central African Republic, Mali, and then the other, Burkina Faso, thank you, that's the other, country that is showing us that martial music may still be, Handel's Messiah in those parts. We don't believe in that here. We want a situation where we can determine who rules us. So let them return to the barracks, wherever
labor, really,
they have
that you started with. They're saying that federal government gave funds to the states, is it not, to implement the palliative? Because federal government, I'm not sure, has a constituent or constituent, so to speak, to where to start sharing these rights to.
Exactly.
So the whole thing is state-based.
At the end of the day, it's a third-tier thing, really.
Exactly. And
because we downplay the importance of the local government in these parts. It is a problem, appreciating.
It's not that it is downplayed officially. It has been, how do I put it? It's been reduced to nothing, by the players, in the political, sector. There's no way you can function in the democratic setting without the local government arm.
No, Kingsley will tell you that,
as an administrative
the
arm.
emperors are the helm of affairs in the states.
And so by the time you make council area ineffective in terms of administration and bringing government to the real people, where we have the majority of Nigerians, then you have failed it all. If there is any system that you are implementing, perhaps as a governor of a state, to say, look, you have to put all the council areas under your purview, the way it appears to be emperorish, as you mentioned, then it becomes entirely a ruse in the first place. For you to believe that you have a system that has an arm of government that has been, deliberately ignored, played down on, and again, now what about the funds meant to do to the council areas? What happens to the funds? And all of that. So I'm not surprised what we're seeing. Yes, you talked about democracy, that we are embracing democracy. Fine and good. That's, of course, what it's supposed to be. But the point is, how do you now play the democracy? What nature of democracy are you in? Are you practicing? What kind of democracy are you practicing? Do you have your own Nigerianized kind of democracy, when certain impunity could take place, because somebody is elected a governor, he dictates the tone for every other thing that happens in the state, and so on. So if you do not involve council area in your administration in a democratic setting, then we have to go and rewrite or redesign the constitution, or better put, find a better way of ensuring implementation.
Redesign it to give democracy a local content.
Exactly. I recall what former President Buhari said. I recall what he said to the governors. I recall that vividly. First of all, he said, look, how do you sleep when you know that you're owing salary to families and thousands of families and dependents? How do you sleep as a governor? He said that. Again, he said, who is killing democracy in Nigeria? Is it me or the governors who are not allowing the council areas to function effectively and efficiently? These are words of former President Buhari to the governors. So he has said it all. Right, so you have to do it right. The constitution is okay. How do you now implement the constitution? That's the big question. And that brings us to what Nigerianized kind of democracy that we're talking about.
That phrase frightens me, Nigerianized. Yeah, I will soon begin hearing things like Nigerianized law and order.
Well, there is a story that Kirian read, and I don't have the full details. So whether it's a temporary measure or it will linger for a while, and it is that Nigerians can now clear their goods on the ports in Cotonou. This is attributed to the Nigerian customs. I think that if that were to be so, we should be concerned. We should be concerned. For many years now, the congestion at the Apapa and Tinkan ports in Lagos, the congestion has defied all solutions. Presidential committee, state government committee, port regulatory authorities committee, and so on and so forth. And now you are saying Nigerians should go to Benin Republic to go and clear their goods. In the first instance, are those western ports the only ports in this country? At the time, you are also saying that the river ports, Onitsha, for instance, will be opened up for use, and you're working on Calabar, you're also working on Akwa Ibom. Why are you asking Nigerians to go to Benin Republic to go and clear their goods? Clear. I don't know. It's something that should not be. Sometimes some of these things just come. Yeah, some people just talk, and you cede your customs duties to a neighboring country.
That's the point. Much needed funds are being lost. Apart from the fact that remotely you're losing sovereignty by implication, But let's just assume that because there's seeming movement towards oneness in the sub-region, certain concessions could be made. But in these times, we need the money that comes as custom dues. So why don't we take all the actions we need to take to make our ports work? What has led to the congestion? You are holding up our money, close to the seas there. That's what it means. It doesn't stand to good reasoning at all.
Well, see, it's all part of poor developmental strategy. Because we keep talking about development plan in this country, and ports, like Kingsley mentioned. I recall vividly again in 1982. I was just employed. As a young man who left high school, I can still remember Shagari of blessed memory. Shagari was in Niger Bridge to inaugurate a port. I don't know. They had this what do you call it? That crane or something mounted. It is still there since 1982. That's the President Shehu Shagari. I'm not missing words.
The man who had a good heart.
The man who had a vision that developed Ajokuta steel complex that we could not even sustain since 1982 till now. And we're talking about development. We're talking about ports. Why wouldn't Lagos Port be congested? It's a deliberate attempt by those involved to keep doing those complexities and money-making machinery set up in the place. That's what is going on. We have ports, and they cannot be used because nobody says it should be used. It's as simple as that. So we are in it. If you bring in something from elsewhere, you go to Cotonou and clear.
Under international law, in general, another state, let's say in international law, it's a state, then a capital S, that's to say a country, has no duty to help you enforce your revenue laws.
That's the point.
So people just wake up and then you just, I don't know.
All right, we have to call it quit.
You're quitting, but let me quickly tell you that there was one of the TV proprietors I worked for took a look at what was happening, how dire things were, and said, ladies and gentlemen, after this meeting, you now know that if you don't have somebody named Hope in your family, you better go back and name somebody Hope. We never get tired of it.
I know. On that note, Chukwudi, thank you for being here this morning. We'll see you again tomorrow.
Thank you so much.
This is Good Morning Nigeria, only on the network service of the NTA. We thank you for being with us up to this moment. Don't go away as we take a short break now to return and open up the major package for this morning. Stay with us.
We must all join hands to work hard so that we build a country for our grandchildren.
My hope is that we develop as a nation where every citizen is given his due right. There is transparency, honesty, and integrity.
Put the interests of this country first and foremost. Interests of.
All right, you're watching Good Morning Nigeria live on NTA's network service. And before we commence the second part of our conversation on how to boost Nigeria's external reserves, let's take excerpts from part one of the conversation which we held a couple of weeks ago. It's put together by a correspondent, Tokbe Alabi.
We are so dependent on importation. Everything we do is imported. And because of that, you have that pressure. And those that are imported, they are not having sources of inflow of FX. And that is the dilemma of it. So you depend on import, but you don't have inflows of FX. You don't import with Naira. You import with foreign currency. So if you don't have the inflows of those currencies and you depend on the government or the central bank as the only source, and the sources of inflows of that government and the central bank is limited, you cannot meet up with your demand. That excess demand, that is what is driving, even the depreciation and everything we're seeing in the market, that is what is driving that trend.
This country has been consistently being raped, and raped by no other personalities than us and a few foreigners doing business in Nigeria. You see people importing raw materials, maybe a kilogram or a ton of a certain raw materials is supposed to be priced as, say, $100. What the importers may be putting in their invoices would have been $120 or $110, despite the fact that they are expected to get volume discount.
In branding and coming out with just one product that we can truly call our own, there are so many things that are involved. For instance, when the Mexico wanted to do a thing about cashew, they vote over $100,000 just to promote that. Nigeria has not gone to the aspects or the level of saying we pick sesame or we pick cashew nuts or we pick cocoa beans, because we have just more than all this in terms of even productivity that FAO, Food Agricultural Organization, have placed Nigeria as #1 in most of these commodities in terms of just production.
If there's any leakage, any opportunity, people want to now take advantage of it, and that has been what has been happening, both for importers and for exporters. And I'm happy, based on what Dr. Mahmoud now just said, that the central bank is coming up with this method of monitoring and price on monitoring prices internationally. This is coming a bit late, but it's better late than never, and I believe we should use technology, wherever available, to limit these leakages.
And now to do a second leg of the conversation on the subject matter, let me welcome Shaib Idris. Shaib Idris is the Managing Director of Timeline Consult Limited. So you're welcome to the program.
Thank you very much. Good morning, Kirian. Good morning, Nigerians, and thanks for having me.
All right, and from our Kaduna Network Center, we have Yushao Ango, Professor of Finance and Entrepreneurship, Kaduna State University. Prof, good morning and welcome.
All right, and then we have two guests also joining us via Zoom. Dr. Hassan Mahmoud is Director, Monetary Policy Department, Central Bank of Nigeria. He's on the split screen there. He's to the left. He's wearing a jacket. Dr. Mahmoud, we're glad to have you this morning.
Good morning, Nigerian. Nice to have me here.
And also with us via Zoom is Professor Ken Ife, a development economist and a regular on Good Morning Nigeria. Prof?
Thank you very much for having me, and good morning, Nigerians.
All right. Well, gentlemen, with the exception of Professor Ken Ife, who wasn't in the first part of our conversation, all of our three guests, you saw the excerpts a moment ago. They took part in the first conversation. Shuaibu Idris, Yushao Ango, and Dr. Mahmoud of the Central Bank. Perhaps, therefore, Professor Ken Ife will give you the first shot this time. You listen to the excerpt, quite concise in framing the matters that were raised by the guests in part one of our conversation. Our foreign reserves are a consistent source of concern. What can be done?
First, let's unbundle the structural constraints, because when apart from the 1884 balkanization of Africa, something, and then the ending of the slave trade, something remarkable happened where there is an international division of labor. So we in Africa, we are consigned to producers of primary raw materials. Whatever it is that we produce has to be primary, so that the West will have a secondary look and then process and bring it back to us to consume. Now that means we have endured for many years import dependency agenda. And I tell you this, and I have to continue to say this, as long as your economy is import dependent, you will remain in the transmission belt of global financial crisis, medical, anything global you are subjected to it. So you will be affected, whether it is mortgage prime crisis in America, whether it is war in Ukraine, whatever it, even in your own raw material, you will be subject, because what is it? Because you are important, you continue to pressure central bank to give you money that they are not supposed to give you. Because I still have that question. Tell me which multilateral, bilateral, or plurilateral trade agreement that say that a central bank should always fund all the frivolous imports. You don't find any. Now, second thing is, you have to, when you are looking at discussing reserves, you have to look at the supply and demand side of forex reserves. First of all, on the source, you have to look at accretions. What are the sources of accretion to our reserves? We know obvious ones: excess crude account. We know the NNPC inflows, because the crude gives us 79% of the forex, and then 11% is coming from gas. So we have to thoroughly unpack what goes on at the NNPC level, because it's 90% that is locked in there. Then the other 10% are loan proceeds that government borrows, and then the proceeds come, the FDIs. We have issues about the FDI. A lot of the constraint on FDI is about the impact of speculation on our economy, and so they can't be sure what the inflation is going to turn out to be. And then there are also structural things like inadequate infrastructure, and then of course you have the speculation going on in our economy, which doesn't help at all. The diaspora remittance, we are seeing challenges we are having there. But there are other sources too that we know that we can use, and we have started using them. Swap deals. Talking to Egypt, what they call Egypt's example. So there are, and you could see that from what the president has just done, with UAE. So those are some of the things, and I'm glad that this government is going to touch the areas that we have not been familiar with. So that is the good news. But on the sources of depletion, bear in mind that, one, you're talking about currency stability. You have to defend your currency. If you have managed float, you have to continue to call on your reserve to defend the currency, and that's the way of. Is another way of saying we have to subsidize. So it's a subsidy of its own. Then you also have the funding eligible imports, which you can't do much about, especially where we want to build capacity on the manufacturing side. And then you have sovereign guarantees that are there. That's where they say some of those are marked. It's because you've been providing guarantees. And then of course you have capital accounts, where we have issues now. You have airlines, threatening that $800 million is being owed to them. You have capital controls, as capital accounts that, you have people that are invested in the foreign portfolios that want their money when they want their money. And, so that then you deal with the monster, which is frivolous demand that comes to as much as $4.6 billion a month. Why CBN itself, as far as I know, requires to spend $1.8 billion every month. Consider that against $4.6 billion of frivolous imports that is chasing us every month. So, and against what the receipt is how much CBN, NNPC used to send $3 billion every month dollars from 2014. Now it's dropped to about 300 million. I don't even know what it is now, but it's not something that we can hold on to. Because of this, the accrued swap thing that I hope is going to end sooner than later. So what you have is a total imbalance, complete imbalance. So if you want to deal with how sustainable we have to have accretion to our reserve, we have to touch both the supply and the demand side. You have to depress the demand. You have to do what you can do to plug the holes and then raise the sources of forex. So that's just my take on this for now.
All right, Professor Kenifer, I'm going to remain with you because I believe you played a critical role in the past at some level with respect to providing services, to previous administration on the nation's economy. And you are someone with in-depth knowledge of world economy and therefore well-grounded in having the knowledge of what Nigerian economy is all about, with its complexities and, of course, what you talked about, the structural concerns. All right. And J.P. Morgan, which, of course, a well-known international outfit, claims that what led to Nigeria's, foreign reserve retardation is a combination of factors, namely foreign exchange, forwards, securities, lending, currency swaps, and outstanding contracts, which it claimed weakened Nigeria's net external reserve. How would you put all of this into context, to let our viewers really understand whether the Central Bank of Nigeria is right to say that the J.P. Morgan's, pronouncements are wrong and based on unfounded ground?
My colleague is there. Hassan Mahmoud will provide you far more details on what is going on. But what I have to say is that there is a reality that some of the money would have been earmarked. I mean, you've been providing sovereign guarantees. Are you giving it for nothing? There is no doubt that some amount of it are being earmarked for a variety of purposes. But I'm not sure that the quantum is correct. But Mahmoud is there to give you the details. But as to how that comes to many people, it comes to many people as a surprise. But not that it is something that should not be should not be expected. So the bank is there to use that reserve to do what it has to do, and it has to use them to provide security. Are you going to say when you are borrowing 3 billion from or 5 billion from China that you're not going to give them foreign guarantees? They do need sovereign guarantees for their loans. Otherwise, it's even more expensive for you to obtain them from World Bank or from Africa Development Bank. You even pay a lot more. So I'm not sure what is to say about that. But it wasn't presented in the best light anyway. It was just as if something has gone wrong. I don't think anything has gone wrong.
All right, Professor Kenife, thank you very much. Indeed, I recall that in the first part of our conversation, Dr. Mahmoud actually responded to the claim by J.P. Morgan explaining how their calculation, of course, was both speculative and didn't factor in the current value of Nigeria's external reserves, and that even if you were to take into account futures and other potential claims on the reserves, it wouldn't be to the value diminished by J.P. Morgan. Professor Kenife, we're going to pause you and then go over to our Kaduna Network Center, where Professor Yushau Ango was earlier introduced. Professor Ango, I would like you to respond to one of the points made by Professor Kenife. He deployed the structural argument with respect to the nature of our economies now, following colonialism, and why we remain largely primary producers, to extent that we are also often highly susceptible to shocks from the external environment. He was talking about the factor of colonialism, of course, relating it to 1884 to 1885, the Berlin Conference that led to the balkanization of the African continent. I just would like you to say this. Look, Malaysia was colonized by the British, and Singapore eventually broke away from Malaysia. Does Singapore have a foreign reserves crisis today? India was equally colonized by the British. Does India have a forex reserve crisis today? Prof.
I like the fact that Prof actually linked this to colonialism, because in reality, if you look at the dynamics and the workings of especially this debate about foreign reserves, it also has direct bearing and implication on our colonial past. I mean, I don't know that it's been past, whether it is still actually what is at work, because basically the Western world has their currencies are convertible, ours are not. Therefore, if you are maintaining reserves, you are maintaining reserves in their currencies. More often than not, the last I checked, for example, the so-called foreign reserve of the United States of America, the largest economy in the world, was just $240-something billion, as against, for example, countries like China, which had almost $4 trillion in foreign reserves. So what I'm saying basically is that our nature, the way the economy, global economy has been structured, is what is even leading to all of these debates, about reserves and things like that. And then, of course, we have discussed, I remember particularly Dr. Hassan and Shuaibu had actually spoken largely, especially on this issue of JP Morgan and their prediction. I mean, nobody says that when you have foreign reserves, you are not going to, or rather those reserves will just be there. You know, again, the fact that they are in largely foreign currencies. They are largely, of course, they are in foreign currencies. They are in dollar mostly. Also, again, is helping to develop some other economies, which is natural, which is normal. But no reserves are kept just like that. You don't just keep money in the banks, you know, as reserves. We have defined and explained the various components of what amounts to reserve. A huge chunk of it, for example, is actually in securities, you know, government securities, and then, of course, in the U.S. especially, and other countries. Again, all of these helping and building other economies. We are operating in that realm. So in reality, colonialism is still with us. You know, in a way, we are being programmed, and we're always working really for other economies, but then we have to do it. What we need to do, again, from what Prof said, you know, is to look at both, and we have said it earlier, is to look at both the demand side and the supply side to see what we can do, you know, within our economies, you know, to manage this. We need to reduce our demands, you know, especially the frivolous ones, like Prof said. We need to reduce those demands. We need to boost our supply sources, you know, by improving and not living up to what we have been set out to do, you know, to be primary producers. We need to go beyond that, especially with what we have, our own resources here. The value chain, we have to take it all through in terms of agricultural value chain, and also for minerals. We have to process them before we send them out. Whatever we need to do, that will help, you know, that will reduce, that will boost our economy. But again, like we said earlier, we need a lot of patriotism on our own part. You know, we need to support Nigerian products. We need to support Nigeria. And then we need to key into, as a country, we need to key into the various initiatives that other countries are going into, especially the dollarization of their economies. You know, many countries are now buying things, you know, from one another in the currencies of the exporting country. Of the importing country, paying, you know, their importing country. We have had swaps here. We have had agreement with China for a limited amount of swap. I think we need to do a lot more. If India is buying our oil, and India is paying for our oil in Naira, or in paying in their own currency, so that we now, if we are buying from India, we now pay in Naira, and things like that. We can now help to improve this. But certainly I agree totally that there is some form of colonialism in it, and that is continuing, you know, have been programmed. We shouldn't allow that to continue with more patriotism on our own part, and then with a deliberate policy to actually improve our sources and then reduce our imports.
All right, we appreciate your opening remarks, Prof. And we'd like to come back here to the Abuja studio where we have Shuaibu Idris. So a number of issues raised, starting from Professor Ken Ife, which my colleague, you know, highlighted, and of course put some question, or similar question to you that has to do with the colonial dimension to this conversation. But I want to recall that I was privileged to be taken to a museum in Indonesia, in Bandung, Indonesia, you know, called the Museum of Africa-Asia Conference of April 1955, where Asians and Africans, you know, met to determine how to deal with colonialism, and of course, you know, push ahead with their own economic agenda as at 1955. And today, we are now going back to Asia to ask for assistance, you know, in terms of not just with the economy or trade or what have you, but science, technology, and innovation. And that baffles, you know, history students, like myself, you know, who, after recalling that early move, you know, to shun colonialism and, of course, you know, develop an agenda for Africa-Asia collaboration and what have you. Now, today, we are the ones behind. And let's bring in Shuaibu Idris once more to talk on this and all those, you know, errors that we made and some non-implementable policies or policies that could be implementable but were poorly implemented and therefore is a rubbing off on us.
Thank you, Kieran. Please, if you don't mind, permit me to take us a little backward to what I can call memory lane. First and foremost, what is or what are reserves? What are a country's reserves? Simply put, these are assets of a nation held basically for the purposes of depending liabilities, and sometimes to accrue the assets so that you can manage them. Reserves, currency or country's reserve. A country's reserve can be in form of cash held in foreign currencies or in special drawing rights or in other metals such as gold or diamond. Now, fast forward, why do countries hold reserves? Countries hold reserve. Initially, it was thought to defend potential import for 3 months and beyond. And, of course, to make sure that, liabilities that may arise against the government are able to be paid as and when the demand for such payment comes up. Within the context of Nigeria, we've had several, if you like, mechanism of reserve management. From the time of independence till now, a lot of policies regarding reserve management, have taken place. Let's not go too far. As recent as Obasanjo's second coming, that is when he came in as civilian president, by the time he was leaving government in 2007, what was our foreign reserve, both in terms of absolute figure and in terms of what we call the excess crude account? By the time Eradua was leaving, what amount was left? By the time Goodluck Jonathan left government, what did we have? Gentlemen, we had some of the highest amount of monies stashed in our reserve account. Now, fast forward, President Buhari came into being. Yes, oil prices went down, there was COVID-19, but in general, I believe we have not been responsible managers of our resources. If we are disciplined, if we are a serious nation, we needed not to have, quote unquote, mismanaged those reserves. If any, we should have built on them. If I were to respond to the argument proposed by Professor Yusha Ango and Professor Ken Ife, I'm not a professor, so I had to join issues with erudite scholars that are occupying professorial chair. But I want to believe that we should gradually begin to own up our inadequacies and indisciplined behavior. For how long will we continue to hide under, the rim of colonialism, as if African countries are the only countries that have been colonized? The lead, uncle, Kingsley said, was India not colonized? Was Malaysia not colonized? Was Korea, South Korea not colonized? And several of these countries were. Even Japan was colonized. Where are they today? Are they still, hiding under the shackle of colonialism to say this is the reason why we are not progressing? For heaven's sake, when you point a finger to somebody, remember that the rest of the fingers are pointing to yourself. So let's come home and look at ourselves and say, what is it that we have been doing wrong and we need to correct? Can we have, as I always ask, an elite national consensus on the way forward for Nigeria? We're talking about reserve and how to manage it. We shall decompose the equation into basically 2-3 variables: the demand side, the supply side, and the factors that influence either side. What are we doing on the demand side? We are a country that has more gas reserve than crude oil, yet we only have one LNG, one natural gas, processing company. For the last 25, 30 years, or even longer, we've been battling to have 2 additional gas processing companies that have not come on board. If there was any angle, any sector that needed intervention by central bank or any other arm of government, is that aspect that can help us to accrue even more dollars so that the supply side can be increased. Secondly, we look at the demand side. What are those aspects that we use our foreign reserve for? Basically, import of raw materials. Number 2, education. Number 3, health. Maybe ostentatious consumptions, add it will make the 4 pillars. Now, raw materials. Must we continue to import these raw materials? To what extent must we be importing items like processed sesame seed or vegetable oil or basic consumer items that we can make and we should be able to make locally? Number 2, education. Why can't we look at even the federal government of Nigeria? Why wouldn't the federal government of Nigeria pick like 2 or 3 universities in each geopolitical zone, the 6 geopolitical zones that we've divided ourselves, and make them centers of learning with international standards and facilities, so that we don't need to be spending money to carry our children to Dubai or Ghana or even Niger Republic to study? Why on earth can't we have state-of-the-art hospitals? We've started seeing a reminiscence of that in Lagos. Why can't we have, say, in Enugu, in Abuja, in Kano or Maiduguri, state-of-the-art hospital that Nigerians need not to rush to India or Egypt or Saudi Arabia or even Ghana to go for simple procedures that we can do? And even when you go to some of these countries, you meet that the doctors are Nigerians. So we need to look at that demand side. We also need to look at the supply side. And like I said the last time when we had this conversation, we also need to look at the policies that we are implementing, because if these policies are encouraging people to demand foreign exchange, this demand will continuously deflate, our reserves. Why should we allow Nigerians to price items in dollars?
All right.
You go to Ghana, you will never be allowed to pay even your hotel's bills with dollars. They will ask you to go and get CD. So why are we allowing even government agencies to price their services in foreign currencies?
All right, Shuaibu Idris, thank you very much there for your intervention. Now let's bring in Dr. Hassan Mahmoud, is the director in charge of Monetary Policy Department at the Central Bank of Nigeria. Dr. Mahmoud, we deliberately kept you to absorb all the contributions by the other guests. But I know you may wish to respond to some of the issues they have raised. But more particularly, let's take a deep dive again into one of the core issues that you raised in the first part of our conversation. And that had to do, and we saw that in the excerpt. So look, the pricing of our imports, are these really genuine prices? Are we getting the real value for what we claim to be spending? And that's to say, how can we more effectively deal with, one, over invoicing? You spoke about that briefly last time, so probably again you elaborate this time. And secondly, and that's a point that Shuaibu Idris has also again now raised. And you keep hearing, oh, we have to import raw materials, we have to import raw materials. And then you are wondering, I said, which raw materials are these? Are these things not right underneath our soils here, so that if there are other ways of intervening to create value addition to the raw materials, could that be an option and ultimately crash the demand for forex, at least for raw materials? Dr. Mahmoud.
Thank you very much, Kingsley. And I see the conversations with the professors here going around the political economy of growth, or what we call the history of economic thoughts in economics. And it is good that we look at things from those historical perspectives or kind of dimension why we are in where we are now. There's a book, I'm sure Kinsley, you're aware of it. They call it Why Nations Fail. It was by Darren Asimoglu. And the context of that book was to compare growths around the world, countries that have advanced and why they advanced, to countries that have failed or that nosedive in terms of their growth trajectory or development indicators to where they are. And the principal factor that came out, or principal variable that came out as a deterministic factor in that analysis, was what you call the strength of your institutions. And I'm bringing this in to just marry what Shaibu just said, the two professors also mentioned. There's also this analysis around, the resource costs, that we actually, started having our problems and backwardness when we discovered oil, because we diversified out of non-tradables and faced the tradables. Tradables are the things that you can export. And also the main reason for the Dutch disease is also tied to institutional, the strength of your institutions. And these institutions actually is not necessarily the infrastructure or the offices or the civil service, but even the human and material resources you have, the kind of brain, the kind of thinking that we do. And I'm taking it to this dimension of our thinking. If we're in a paradigm where we allow certain economies of the world to determine to us how we move, which is the trajectory that we've maintained all this while, how we move, how we decide, how we structure our economies, then they will definitely do it for their own benefits. Now, all the economies, advanced economies we see in the world, grew up from primary resources. United Kingdom, the Netherlands, even the US, even the Chinese economy. So there's nothing wrong starting with primary. There's nothing wrong moving out raw materials. The mining industries in the UK, they developed, industrialized using coal. Even the continental shelf of Europe, UK also use oil exports to build its economy to where they are today. But what enables you to transform from this resource-dependent or resource primary production to a more complex economic society is the way the institutional arrangements that enables you to transform this influence to better economic benefit. And why am I saying all this analysis is the fact that why we are so dependent on importation, why we are so much, talking about our reserves and our reserve position, how to improve the reserve position, is because we are structured in such a way that we go the way they ask us to go. We said we're diversifying, we should diversify out of oil because it's polluting, but other people, these same people that ask us that, grew their economy from the same oil. So why don't you diversify inside the oil? So instead of vertical diversification going up, go horizontal. Develop other sectors of the oil industry to make sure that, yes, crude production is not your main thing, but take it to plastic, petrochemical, fertilizer, all those, they are coming from oil. So the argument is and that is why both professors started with colonialism. But I think at the level we are now, we should have used colonialism as an advantage. We shouldn't be complaining about those guys that left almost 100 years ago and saying that the time we choose the path we're taking now, because either we were, carried away by the rhetorics of where we went to school or how they trained us. But like the examples they gave, other Asian economies use the same trajectory to develop their economy. The Asian tigers that we're talking about actually develop faster during autocratic regimes. So military, we're saying military brought us backward. Those guys grew under military regimes, under autocratic regimes. So the point I'm trying to make here is that we need to look at ourselves, see our peculiarities, use our brains, our domestic brain that we're groomed here, and develop an economic path, a growth path that mimics this our historical trend or where we want to land. Now we are all worried that we need external reserve, external reserve. Why? How do we boost it? Because this external reserve, we are building it for other people. It's not likely for us, so that we can be able to buy from those people. I don't want to be too drastic to say that why do you even need the external reserve? Why don't you get everything you need domestically? But the world is a global economy now, and we need to integrate with each other. We need to also create more markets for ourselves. But you can only create more markets for yourself if you have the product to play in that market, because that market has an international standard. So we jumped into that space without, one, develop the domestic market to meet that global international standard to make us competitive in that market. But we kept ourselves in the lower band of that market such that we are just dependent on what we are directed to do. In the last discussion we had, if you remember, we also said that it's the value addition that you put to your primary product that determines the gains you have in those primary products. We've seen countries like Ghana have left cocoa beans export now to Ghana chocolates. You see them in stores in London, in America. They call it Ghana chocolates. They've advanced to that, so packaging will come in there. Labeling and all that come in there, refining the product, having a particular taste that is unique to Ghana. And I gave example when we used to talk of Swiss chocolate or Belgian chocolate, and it's a unique brand. So long as we do not, when we did our basic international economics or international trade, they call it, there's this comparative advantage. We've lost track of that now. What it really means is that wherever you have that strength, build that strength to such a level that nobody can compete with you. So you be the main player in that space. And that's what Microsoft is doing. That is what Apple is doing. Build intensively in that you field and be the major supplier. We are not the major supplier of anything. We are not the major, even in terms of the way we use our intelligence, it's not even unique to our economy. So the argument is we are where we are now because of the way we decide to structure, our economic system, the superstructures of the economy. So long as institutions are not strengthened, there is no rule of law, there is no transparency, there is no accountability, there is no good governance, there is no, robust and a transparent civil service. All those institutional arrangements are very critical for us to get to where we want to go. Now, in terms of, I'm sorry for that long digression. Now, for the issues around boosting our external reserve, and I think Mr. Shaibu Idris and Professor Ike has also mentioned a lot of an angle. I've also mentioned a lot of the points here. It is important that, one, we look inwards. There was this slogan that eat what you produce, or use what you produce locally, to a level where you can now start exporting. We can only increase those reserves by what we export. The foreign exchange policies that the bank or the central bank or the economy is embarking upon is such that while your currency depreciates, it enables you to export more because your export is going to be cheaper. But when those inflows are coming in, don't forget that the cost of your own import will also be higher. If, for example, your inflation is high and your interest rate numbers are also very high compared to your trading partners. So what will be important for you in your own economy is to increase the value of that your export, such that the inflows you get from that your export is enough to cover the limited, because you have to make deliberate efforts to reduce your imports. It's a global game. And so we don't just sit down that, because we want to help other economies or because we want to be the supplier of primary products for those economies to build their factories, and when they produce those items, they bring it to us to consume. We don't go anywhere. So I think I don't want to speak too much.
Yeah, Dr. Hassan Mahmoud, Dr. Mahmoud, you've spoken well. It's not too much because I'm going to stay back with you. You raise very important matters, and that is going to bring me to your own professional, purview for us to see what can be done. You just record for me comparative advantage in international trade. Right. Nigeria has a comparative advantage over palm fruits, for instance, but we failed. We failed to, carry on with the value addition. Nigeria has competitive advantage over oil, but we failed to even refine the oil that we consume domestically. We can go on and on and on. Cassava, we're the largest in the world, the largest producer of cassava in the world. What have we done to add value to cassava, to have Nigerian cassava package in foreign superstores? As you mentioned, Ghana chocolate. What about Cote d'Ivoire chocolate as well? That transformed from cocoa to chocolate as well, and have gone so far. Burkina Faso, in terms of cotton, they have gone so far using GMO, and they're now the #1 in Africa in terms of cotton, production. Kenya, flowers, and what have you. We can name them. But now, let me come back home. Central bank, as it is, you have, 5 major roles, if I understand that clearly. Monopoly of note issue, banker of the government, bankers bank, lender of the last resort, controller of credit, and maintaining stable foreign exchange rate. Now, in the past, not long ago, central bank intervened in agriculture. We talked about paddy rice and others. I'm asking, is it a possibility for Central Bank of Nigeria to engage in manufacturing or engage the manufacturing sector squarely to say, if we must have a product that has value chain, Central Bank is funding this project to the latter, and you ensure that it is completed and done and become an international product for Nigeria? Because all you mentioned are indicative of the fact that, look, all policies are not properly implemented. That's why we have more import than export. So what can Central Bank do, given the powers, bestowed on it by the Constitution of Nigeria?
Thank you very much, Kieran. I think another thing I'm going to say in that area will still be in the previous way I did my argument. That's what we call quantitative easing. It's the same as central bank intervention in an economy, but this now in a monetary term, and it just means that the central bank directly gives funding to the economy to boost growth or to drive development or facilitate industrial output or manufacturing output growth, and they do that through what you call asset buyback or from the public and inject liquidity into the system. When we got into that space, central banks in the developing economies, we were told that it's an unorthodox policy system. It shouldn't be encouraged. But the same advanced economies are doing this and are still doing this, and they actually introduced it. And because they say we should go out, you don't know, central bank, get out of development, that is not your purview, go and do monetary policy, go and do inflation targeting, and that is where you belong. But we have forgotten that central bank is just an institution within the Nigerian economy. And all institutions within the Nigerian economy are supposed to collaborate, coordinate, and harmonize their policy strategies to benefit our economy, Nigeria, not the economy of the world. We have to benefit Nigeria first before we go to the rest of the world. So the intervention debate, and I think Shawu Idris may also speak to this, the intervention debate has got to a level that central banks are classified quasi-physical, getting beyond their directories. And I can also say boldly that for central bank to even go into developmental activities is also an institutional failure factor. Because if our agricultural sector, which has a lot of institutional arrangements that are beneficial or that will fast track this development of the agricultural sector, and by extension, the manufacturing sector, including the extension services, including the Cereal Research Institute, so many of these institutions that we have that are supposed to boost agriculture, that we are supposed to be in what we call industrialized or commercial mechanized agricultural state by now, or maybe like 30 years ago, are not functional because of us, the same institutional failure. So for central bank to go, central bank is number one, is supposed to just be the banker to the government and also facilitate, how government, does some of its payments by supporting the fiscal authority that are in charge of the government expenses and all that, and also, keep the accounts of government. Well, you mentioned that maintain the external value of the domestic currency because we're the issuers of the legal tendered currency to avoid people using their own private currency. Now, that rules are actually even going out now because you have private currencies now that are not central bank currencies, and those currencies are international currencies now because of the crypto and all that we're seeing. So see the erosion of some of those services, or so some of those function. But going direct to your point, yes, it is good to support, the other sectors of the economy, particularly the risk sectors of the economy. But we have gotten to a stage now that we allow each persons to specialize in their areas, and we concentrate on our core area. And how will this be done? Even the interventions that we've had before, there's nowhere that central bank give loans to individuals directly from the central bank purse, or you come to the central bank counter to collect your loan for agriculture or collect your loan from infrastructure. We do it through the normal banks, BOI, NISA, microfinance bank, the commercial banks, and all that. Even the commercial credit facility that we're done through commercial bank. So it's just that create the bucket of fund and let those that have. Central bank does not have the specialty of risk monitoring or management. We are not done for retail banking, but give it to those that will play in that space. Central bank also does not have the agri department that knows how to do extension services or do research in cereal product. No, but finance those channels such that those channels will grow on themselves and do the function that they are supposed to do. So I will not say central banks should directly go to manufacturing, but channels to support that manufacturing sector, enable even commercial banks to provide credit to the manufacturing sector to enable them grow extensively. But don't forget also that there are other factors, infrastructural factors that are important for the manufacturing sector to grow. We have been saying for the last 30 years, agriculture is not growing, central banks put money in agriculture, but we have not developed the environment around where agriculture will be a business, rather than, what do you call it, a philanthropic or something for government to do. The primary production process cannot enable a bank. The banks are not even interested. We are forcing banks to go to agriculture. It's their private business. You don't dictate to them where they want to go. So, but if you create that social and infrastructural base, the underlying fixed capital that will go into that space, the roads, the security in those places, the different seed brand, high yield seeds that will come into that space. Other people are doing that specialization in different areas. A lot of banks and private individuals will go into farming. When we started the other interventions in the agriculture sector, a lot of farmers, went to that, but they are subsistence farmers. They produce to feed. They are not producing to export. The ones that are big enough to export are quite limited. Also, we've been talking about primary product. We produce rice and you just take the rice to your kitchen and you eat. You don't translate rice to conflicts. You don't translate rice to different other products that you can even take out of your own environment, so that the gains you use from that, you now started eating a different, maybe basmati rice or other advanced rice that are maybe more health friendly. So the question of central bank going directly into this field, which is outside of its mandate, is still not something I'll fly for now. But it is the fact that if we look at the fundamentals of our economy and we see the state at which we are in, then we should domesticate our thinking, and we should domesticate how we use economic and political theories or in the application of us achieving our developmental goals. So not central bank going directly, but the channels to support those manufacturings and all that, using the appropriate institutions there, the commercial banks, the development banks, the microfinance banks for the SMEs. It's a welcome development.
All right. Thank you very much, Dr. Hassan Mahmoud, and indeed the other guests. We're going to take a short break now. When we return from the break, we continue with the conversation.
The job of making Nigeria great is my ambition, is my dream. To renew the hope of Nigerians, to really bring about changes that will promote unity, equity, stability, and prosperity for this country. It's not a one-man's job. It's a job of all of us.
All right, welcome back, and still Good Morning Nigeria live on NTA's network service and broadcasting from our headquarters studios in Abuja. I want to come very quickly to Shuaibu Idris. Shuaibu, in the first part of our conversation, we talked about two things, because we said demand for forex and then supply side. Demand by way of raw materials, education, and health needs, but I want to focus on, say, raw materials and indeed other aspects. The question of over-invoicing. And then for the supply side, we have seen a number of government programs and projects aimed at boosting non-oil exports, so that when the exports proceeds do come in, of course, we would have a higher markup in terms of our earnings. But some have argued that there are also concerns about underreporting of export proceeds. So how do we deal with these issues? And I want to very quickly draw attention to a story in the leadership newspaper today. We were doing newspaper review, we didn't touch on it, but I saw that it's on page 66. It says Nigeria's ginger export hits 10 billion naira in Q2 of this year. And this is much higher compared to the same period of 2022, when the exports were 4.6 billion. Now, this is just for ginger alone. There are, of course, a number of other produce that we do export on the basis of the facilities provided under the Export Expansion Grant, and so on and so forth. This figure is coming from the NBS, according to the paper. So, how much institutional linkage is there in terms of information sharing for us to begin to probably gather intelligence and then have a sense of under declaration of exports that ordinarily could have boosted, our holdings? Shuaibu.
Thank you very much, Kingsley. I think we need to tread on the path of caution. Nigerian Bureau of Statistics needs to be careful when they are bandying figures. Kingsley, fellow discussant, and Nigerians. Last year, a bag of maize sold for about 17,000 naira. Maximum it went was 25,000 naira. Today, a bag of maize, the same bag of maize is being sold at 60,000 naira, not less than 60,000 naira. Now, if ginger export increased from, say, 4.7 billion naira in the first quarter to 10 billion naira, should we beat our chest? I would have thought the MBS should be indexing such, data with the quantity rather than the price, because the moment you introduce the variable called inflation, you realize that maybe the 10 billion naira is not even something to celebrate, because of obvious factor that maybe the quantum has not increased. And now, should we even be jubilating that we are exporting raw ginger? For how long? We've addressed this the last time we had this conversation with the doctor that came from the Export Promotion Council, where we alluded to the fact that there was and there has been an export expansion grant donation by government of the Federal Republic of Nigeria to exporters, and the idea was the money given to them is they should use it to expand export. And expansion doesn't necessarily mean produce more, but play more on the value chain. Like we have alluded again during the last conversation, those who play at the two extreme end of the value chain don't get maximum value. If you are selling primary commodities or you are selling finished product, all you have is a small mark of 5%, 10% maximum. So if you don't add value, you will not be able to get significant income in your account. So we need to juxtapose that. Now, fast forward the intervention by Central Bank. Dr. Mahmoud, alluded to the fact that yes, CBN is sometimes been misdirected by the powers that be, i.e. the developed economics, to say Central Bank don't do this, do that. I think sometimes we need to be taking such advices with the pinch of salt. I know where the part of my body that scratches me or itches me most that needs to be scratched. Why will I sit down and be waiting that someone will tell me, scratch this part of your ear, the right hand, not the left hand, when I know that it is the left hand that is itching me? We also need to, our leaders need to tread on the part of caution by making sure that we do what we feel is the right thing. Now, the issue of the demand you have alluded to, Kingsley, as long as we don't tame the monster called corruption. I did say this the last time we had this conversation. One of the, I will say Professor Ken Ife alluded to ostentatious consumption or amorphous demand for the dollars, is people who have raped this economy and people who have taken so much of our resources. Even if the dollar is 2,000 naira, they will still buy. They will still buy this dollar. So we need to fight corruption. Lastly, before I stop, Kingsley, certainly, and I repeat, certainly in the last 25, 30 years, 35 years that have been associated with export of commodities from Nigeria to other parts of the world, we've come across significant proportion of under-invoicing. And if any, sometimes export of some of our primary agricultural commodities to nearby countries like Benin or Togo to be repackaged and sold to other countries as if this produce are not Nigerian produce. The last conversation we had, I was coming in from Kaduna with a gentleman that works for an international company. He told me that they were taking, his company was taking sesame seed from Nigeria, exported to India under a different guise, and then repackaged and sold as if it is Indian produce with a premium mark. So Nigeria has lost that income, and there has been significant under-invoicing, and of course, the integrity and the image that Nigeria would have earned by exporting such qualitative, produce, we've lost it. So the same thing that the central bank has done in terms of this price monitoring system or verification system that they have introduced, we may need to begin to look at that. I remember during late Abacha's regime, the NXP, Nigerian Export Form, was introduced. It was the first time it was introduced, largely with a view to address under-invoicing from Nigerian exporters. We have a lot to do. Fundamentally, back to my axiom, we need to have an elite consensus that all of us, elites of this country, will buy in, and so that we can be disciplined and we can be a little, patriotic about this country, so that the country can be better for all of us.
All right, Shaibu, thank you very much indeed. We'll return to Professor Kenny for one more time. Professor Ife, a lot has been said actually, and I'm sure you've taken note of the items you intend to lash on. But I have this for you. When we talk about the foreign reserve, I just wonder why the magic behind all other nations have been able to do. For instance, Singapore, we've talked about here, that has over $1.64 trillion as foreign reserve. It's amazing, and that's talking about a double-digit, economy, here. And so, can we borrow a leaf from a country such as Singapore, which of course has central bank like we have, charged with the responsibility of managing foreign reserve, exchange rate, and what have you. But that's something that they did in 1981. That's Singapore. They developed a concept called a GIC. GIC is a multiple investor that invested in more than 40 countries for the only purpose of managing foreign reserve. I don't know the magic. You must have studied that concept. Is it plausible in the first place for us to even think in that direction, having such a concept to deliberately manage foreign reserve? Can you just lead us into this and see how any of our policies, may have touched that aspect and perhaps failed in the past? I wouldn't know, because I'm sure that if such idea was floated and was not followed, that's why we're still where we are today.
Well, first of all, there are three areas. One is that Singapore actually began by fighting speculators. So they refused to tell anybody or make it public how much their reserve is, because they say this is a financial war. So in this war, our secret is our reserve. We don't know, nobody should know what our reserve position is. So they started fighting speculators, and the speculators didn't know the strength of their reserve, and then they fought them off. Nigeria, every day you see our reserve there. Now, JP Morgan says it's only 3 billion surplus. So you are working with competitors or speculators who are looking at your strength, and they say, well, if CBN is going to intervene, just let's see how much they're going to bring, 300 million, 400 million. So they think that they know your secrets, so they can fight and then hold out for much longer. But anyway, the second point, of course, is the strategy that Singapore is using. Some of the strategies Nigeria is already copying, and I will come to that because it's Ministry of Finance Incorporated, which is what I'm involved in very much. We are looking at how we sweat the assets of government, the dormant assets, and how we can bring them back into use. And some of those are the strategies that are being looked at right now. And you see, Egypt is benefiting from $22 billion pledge from UAE, Qatar, and Saudi Arabia, putting it all together. Of course, their dormant assets are all in the picture. And then we also have what we do to sweat existing assets. And this is where I said, look, let's look deeply into what NNPC is doing, because Saudi Arabia needed $25 billion, and they didn't want to go and borrow it from World Bank or anybody. They said, look, I want to know the value of my Saudi Aramco. And when they valued it in 2019, it came up at $1.5 trillion. And they said, all right, go to capital market and take 5%. And 2 years after, because of the discipline that has come down on the company and the transparency and what has improved, 2 years after they rose, their value rose to $2.3 trillion. So we're going to do something about NNPC, because the NNPC going to market can unlock huge liquidity for Nigeria. And I've been raising this within those circles where I'm working. Then, of course, the third one is to actually explain to you that there are many factors at play. If you look at Africa, the countries we are comparing to Nigeria are not actually exactly in the same situation as we are. When you talk about Singapore, Indonesia, and all of that, they're not in the same situation that we are. You can compare us more to South Africa or Ghana or that. Let me tell you what happened. If you look at Francophone in Africa, France wrapped them up, controlled their foreign policy, their monetary policy. They lodged fixed their money to the euro, and then bond 80% of their reserves to keep that value. And then also give them only about 20%. And if they want to borrow, they borrow their own money at commercial rates. And then France has the first right of refusal to every government contract. Not even their citizens can't even access that. So that has brought trouble. And you know that this trouble is going on. But in the case of Nigeria and Anglophone countries, yes, it was with England. But remember, England wasn't dealing with us directly. It was through Europe. And though we have European Partnership Agreement. And Nigeria fought and succeeded, because when they brought that European Partnership Agreement, I was in ECOWAS. And then we looked at it, and they will carry that computable equilibrium economic analysis. I will say, no, if Nigeria signs this, it will decimate all our manufacturing companies, and Nigeria refused to sign. Others signed, but Nigeria refused to sign. So what I'm saying that because in part of the offer, market offer, is that they want 80% of our import. How can you do that? When we're importing from China, it would mean that we won't even import from Africa. We can't give you 80% of our import. And then there are so many things about dispute resolution, all the many things. And we said, no, you can't. And Nigeria agreed. And we didn't sign. So there are many things that you have to look into when we are comparing them. Then there's political economy that looms really large in our economy. And that is what you need, the strong political leadership and strong economic leadership to fight and contend. And Bola is doing that. Bola said, I'm ready to fight. Whatever will happen tomorrow, let it happen today. So that's a different approach. So what you are going to see is that we're actually now beginning to tackle that level of political economy that has emasculated our economic development opportunities. So,
all right, Professor Ken Ife, I know that you still have a lot to say, but we have to pause it so that we give Professor Yushao Ango some moment to wrap up his thoughts. But I want to throw this in to Professor Yushao Ango. If we are pressed, as we are indeed pressed for Forex, and we are seeing the knock-on effect all around us, the main sources, raw materials, health, and education. Is it possible for us as a country to make a calculation to say, look, what is the population of students in Nigerian universities, for instance, pursuing their first degrees? What is the population of Nigerians who are seeking Forex to pursue also their first degrees abroad? And if we have our priority areas, say in STEM, in the STEM fields, could the government say, all right, unless you are going for STEM as a first degree, and unless, of course, you are also going for a master's program after your first degree in Nigeria, go source your own Forex? Again, if you are not pursuing, or say, if you are pursuing a STEM program, first degree, outside of this country, you have access to Forex. If you are pursuing a first degree other than STEM, you won't have access to Forex through the official window. But if you are pursuing a master's program in whatever field outside of this country, you have access to Forex. Can that be a dent?
The funding of education for foreign students is concerned, it's a matter of concern to everybody. It's not because our universities are incompetent or they cannot provide the education in most disciplines, actually. But what is happening basically is maybe the number of people they can accommodate given the facilities that are available. So what basically we need to do is to ensure that these facilities are provided. TED Fund is doing quite a good job of it, but I think a lot more needs to be done. And I want to stress also that most parents, that are actually sending their students or their children abroad are actually not necessarily getting foreign exchange from official sources. Quite a number are actually getting from autonomous sources, but it's not desirable. What is desirable, as much as possible, is to improve our universities, to improve their capacity, to admit more in terms of facilities and equipment. I think that is necessary. I know I'm just have to round up. I want to say, for example, that I've had the presentation, the submission of Shuaibu and Dr. Mahmoud, largely alluding somewhat to the fact that maybe what I was talking about colonialism and what Professor Ken was talking about colonialism was more like, we're looking at it from theoretical perspective. In reality, they have also alluded to the same thing, because, for example, Dr. Mahmoud said there are some organizations, like the multilateral agencies that are insisting CBN should behave this way or behave that way. That is colonialism. They are trying to change. We have moved from colonialism to neo-colonialism, to neoliberalism. That is what we are saying should be changed. And again, we have all agreed, more or less, that we should look at more on the demand side, manage the demand side. We are in agreement on that. Manage the supply side. We are in agreement on that. We are saying also that we should be more patriotic, and then also, and that's what Shaibu is talking about, maybe there should be some kind of understanding and agreement between elites, That's all we are saying. The difference between us and those countries that have achieved sincerely, go there, most of us have traveled to all those countries, is patriotism. They are actually focused on their countries, they are patriotic, they have clear developmental agendas. Here we allow even foreigners, just like, again, Shoaib gave the example, a foreign company will come here, export our products out, illegally, and then package them in some other way. Again, all of this is patriotism. Again, all of this is not.
I wish we would have time to go on and on and on because you are just raising very pertinent points there. And we've had it all. I mean, what it takes to build a nation is a high level of patriotism and discipline. That's just the way out. And without which, of course, all policies could just go down the drain without any achievement. Now, we want to appreciate all of you for being here this morning. Let me begin with the man that we are seeing on screen at the moment, Professor Yushao Ango, Professor of Finance and Entrepreneurship, Kaduna State University. Thank you, indeed, for being with us this morning. We'll also appreciate here in the studio Shoaibu Idris. Shoaibu Idris, of course, is regular here, the Managing Director, Timeline Consult Limited. Thank you, Shoaibu. Dr. Hassan Mahmoud, Director, Monetary Policy Department, Central Bank of Nigeria. We thank you once again for being here. Now, Central Bank is talking to us, and we appreciate that. Thank you indeed for reaching us via Zoom. Professor Ken Ife, of course, you're almost part of us. We appreciate you. We thank you. We thank you for also waking up with us this morning, having reached us via Zoom. Of course, Professor Ken Ife is a development economist. All right, now before we leave you, let's peep into the sporting world.